transforming that alumina into aluminum. And the process of transforming bauxite into alumina is a refinery type process, is a chemical process, and then from alumina to aluminum, it's a smelting process, so it's an electrochemical process. And those are basically, the facilities called smelters are distributed around the world. So we're mining in like Ghana, I mentioned. Biggest mines are in Western Australia, Brazil, and the smelters are in places like Saudi Arabia, Iceland, wherever energy is cheap. And so what's happened over the last 20 years is smelters that have a lower cost position than our traditional smelters. We have 20 smelters distributed around the world. So others have built smelters that are lower cost position because they use lower energy costs. So today, just in the last 20 years, I would say that about 55% of the world's aluminum supply now is coming from China, right? Where it wasn't before. It was probably 10%, or 10% 25 years ago. Now it's about 55%. So we have a fleet of ore haulers that haul, alumina and aluminum around the world and bauxite. So they're going in different directions now, right? So instead of going from an alumina plant to a smelter plant, let's say traveling from Western Australia to Reykjavik, they're now going from Western Australia to China, right? So our biggest competitors are now our biggest customers, if you will. So that's an interesting dichotomy. It's changed the company in such a way that we now see a very distinct difference between the traditional aluminum side of our business, which is about half of our revenue, and other businesses. So that's, I think, an interesting dynamic that's emerged in the last 20 years or so.
Anybody else?
Sure. So we are in the power generation industry. I think like one of the trends that we are seeing in the power generation industry, and one of the challenges that the giants in this industry has been facing, is where the raw material is and where the demand is, and how to connect the two together and get them to the point that is cost efficient. For us, for example, we were supplying GE and Siemens, about less than 10 years ago. Now today, GE and Siemens, who were our customers, and they're still our customers, they become our suppliers. So the demand around the globe for power supply forces pretty much everybody to become closer, work together closely, and try to basically not only provide, but also support each other. With GE and Siemens in particular, they basically found that the source of material and where they can get the material from impacts their costs tremendously. So now GE has a facility in China basically building the same type of turbine that they're building in the US, and Siemens has a facility in India doing the same type of thing. Now us as a customer for these two companies, we prefer to get the product with the same technology from GE China rather than GE in the US, just due to the cost impact that it has. You can get the same type of assemblies for 10% less cost, and that by itself plays a huge role in making our final product competitive to our final customer. So that's an interesting trend in the at least power gen industry, that you see that the giants are moving away from just being the giants. They're becoming one of the typical players of the market, and now the rest of the group who were small players in this industry are coming together, becoming a larger player, and then the direct supplier-customer relationship that was always was the story in the past, that was a traditional basically relationship in the past. It's going away. It's becoming something new that everybody kind of is at the same level. The giants are still the giants, but now we are closer to each other, and we are working together on a lot of various projects around the board.
Yeah, collaboration is certainly becoming key. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I'm glad Kuya mentioned power generation, because if you think about it, is the single most important engine for economic growth and development. If you don't have energy, and a lot of parts of the world don't have ready access to energy at all, let alone cheap, affordable energy, you can't grow, you can't develop, and your people stay in poverty. And so there's a real tension today where we can afford not only cheap energy, we can afford expensive energy, and so we're willing to make some adjustments to cut down on emissions and be able to make a difference in terms of the overall health of our planet. A lot of other countries don't have that luxury. And I would challenge anybody who's involved in world trade to look a poor person in the eye and say, you know what, we're going to deny you energy in the name of protecting the planet. So we're not going to let you grow, we're not going to let you develop, and yet that's the essential thing. So the key is first, get the energy to where it isn't. Then the next step is to make it more efficient, bring the cost of that energy down. And during that period of time, you start seeing the creation of jobs, you start seeing clean water, you start seeing kids in schools, all the necessary things for growth. And we've been myopic in terms of not having a true national policy that we're willing to put at international levels to be able to help the countries that need that the most get the power, get the energy they need to be able to grow.
Now, you bring up a good point. Actually, there's probably a whole nother topic on water, right? Yeah.
Water and sanitation.
Yeah, exactly. All right, go ahead.
Not to put on the boxing gloves here.
That's all right, debate's going.
I know that's what
We'll get it going.
Put them on. You know, energy is a huge issue that we're dealing with in Southern California in order to electrify our ports. And we could have another whole topic, so another whole hour discussion, so we're not, I'll just skim the topic, the top of it here, but there's been executive orders from our governor. There are policies from the California Air Resources Board and the Southern California Association, the South Coast Air Quality Management District. There's so many acronyms that are trying to keep them all straight sometimes. But one of the directives that we have as an industry is to electrify our ports. I know we're talking about global issues, but right here at home, the energy issue is so important that it could possibly drive cargo away to other ports, which goes back to that original mission that we have to keep our ports competitive and to keep that cargo here because of the directive that we have to electrify our ports. I serve on a committee. I was appointed by Mayor Eric Garcetti of Los Angeles to the Port of Los Angeles Sustainable Freight Advisory Committee. And one of our missions is to get as much zero emission trucks and other equipment operating at the ports as soon as possible. But that means having electric vehicles, electric trains, electric trucks, everything electrified as much as we can. The challenge that we have is we don't have enough electricity to do that. South Coast AQMD won't allow any new sites to be built, any new power plants to be built. We don't have enough solar. We don't have enough fuel cells. There's just challenges everywhere. And Department of Water and Power in the City of Los Angeles doesn't have the capacity to get that to the Port of Los Angeles. I'm working with Southern California Edison on trying to get that power to the Port of Long Beach. So it just exasperates all the problems, and going to those greenhouse gas emissions. If we can do things here in Southern California that can help reduce those gas emissions, that's fantastic. But our concern is that are we just moving those emissions to another area that really doesn't help the globe? It doesn't help us globally reduce those emissions. So there's a lot of moving parts to the energy issue as well. We all want to have, you know, green equipment and clean air, but how do we do that and keep the cargo here at the same time when we don't have enough power source to begin with? And that's the rub. You know, how do we get there from here?
Yeah, it's a tall order, to be sure.
When it comes to power policy in California, we are a third world country. we don't have a good policy other than we ain't gonna let anything new get built, which is a really, really bad way of managing energy.
Yes, absolutely.
Very true, and we won't even get started about airports, because they do go global too, right? At least we're finally getting Ontario back to some progress there. All right, what about insourcing versus outsourcing? Are you seeing trend? I actually happen to be doing a study on that right now, but do you see any trends as far as folks moving back from China, or, I don't know, insourcing versus outsourcing? Do you see anything?
It's a good question.
Or near sourcing?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked. Two trends, lots of insourcing, reversing some of the outsourcing. We see a lot of that with big OEMs. People like Boeing is taking work back from partners that they've established, in some cases buying those partners. And interesting new trend too, more on the intellectual side, more on the services side, is a lot of crowdsourcing. So crowdsourcing, a little bit different from outsourcing. You're relying on outside resources to bring you ideas, concepts, and so forth. They could be analytical tools, it could be a variety of things. There's an interesting company starting up. It's kind of getting a grant from the Department of Energy the same way Tesla got started. And it's all about crowdsourcing. And so they're relying on distributed knowledge of engineers around the world to design a new car and a new way of making cars. So instead of cars being made in very large factories as we have today, they envision producing these cars in what we call microfactories that are the size of a body shop. So the factories would be distributed locally, and the cars would be built for the exact sort of local conditions, let's say in Pittsburgh or Seattle or wherever. All the engineering is being done with distributed knowledge, crowdsourcing around the world. Some of you may know about Hyperloop, designing the high-speed transportation for California, but for other places. There are two Hyperloop companies. One of them is all being funded or being done with crowdsourcing knowledge. So they're relying on knowledge from people that may be working for Boeing or SpaceX or whomever to develop, and essentially they're moonlighting to develop concepts and detailed designs. We did an experiment recently where we said, let's try this crowdsourcing thing. And we use an established community, crowdsourcing community, and we posed a problem to the community. And the community is one that was active, solving problems for GE and NASA and a few others. And it was interesting. We thought we would structure the problem in such a way that we would get perhaps 20 or 30 different entrants, because our capacity to evaluate the solutions were limited. So we said, well, let's try to structure it so it appealed to a small segment. Well, to our surprise, we got 300 concepts. And they came from places like Hungary, South Africa, Australia, and very high quality concepts that we couldn't hire 300 engineers to work on that one problem. So for, I think, less than $10,000, we had 300 concepts. I mean, just imagine the power of that. So we see a company the size of Airbus now crowdsourcing the design of their next generation cargo aircraft, which means they're not going to be designed by people that are in, let's say, Toulouse, France. They could be designed in some ways, distributed the knowledge, and it could be designed in part by people from China, Russia, wherever. So this is an interesting concept. Insourcing is coming back, big thing, but also crowdsourcing that are being, I think, affected by the digital tools that we have available to us today.
Very interesting. Does anybody else have something to add? Josie?
So this is not so much outsourcing to external suppliers, but within BBRON we identify throughout the world what we call centers of excellence. And there, you wind up having your expertise for certain technology located in a certain area of the world. And if some other BBRON site needs that expertise, we lean on the center of excellence. And what that means sometimes is that we may make a film here in the US, ship it to Switzerland, they make a bag, they ship the bags back, and we fill it here. So sometimes I'm not sure that from a total cost standpoint, You know, it always works out well, but you do get the expertise there. You know, we have another situation where they have a bag making expertise elsewhere, or we'll make the bag here for a certain product. We'll ship that bag to, in this case, a non-B Braun facility. They'll fill it there in Italy, and then they'll ship it back to us as a PFG. So it has less to do with, you know, comparing the lowest cost, and more to do with where do we have the expertise so that we ensure that we get the highest quality product. And most of it's done within B Braun facilities that are located throughout the world.
Well, actually, we had a tour to Paulson Manufacturing recently with the Apex group, and Roy was saying the same thing, that they had no choice but to. It was quite bizarre. Like, went from here to Europe and traveled the world, but it was the only way he could get this particular product made. It was with the right expertise. So, go ahead, John.
One of the flashpoints in the world is the South China Sea, and some incident in the South China Sea could severely disrupt the supply chain, anything coming out of China, and do that for some extended period of time. That's not terribly likely, but the risk is much higher now